think it's 3:10. We have a really packed schedule here, so we're going to get started. But thanks for coming. Today we're going to talk about a concept that I'm not even sure really exists, creative control. What is that? But between myself and Jeff, we're going to talk about creative in-house teams and what is the best organizational structure, especially in a context that, as we know, is changing rapidly. So why are we actually here? So whether it's a design system, generative AI that is finally producing our creative for us, or what do we need people for, and really a pace of change with really compressed budgets. It can be really difficult to sort of find our footing, especially when we're used to doing things the old-fashioned way. So for us, again, with these challenges that creative teams were facing, it wasn't just about how can we do our jobs, but like the real process and how are we organized to actually collaborate in order to get to the output. So yeah, for us, I'm coming from Ubisoft Entertainment prior to my role at EvolveDrupal, where I was in the knowledge management department, and again, creative storytelling, videos, long-form articles, live shows. There are really a lot of different ways to use creative methods to actually capture and then share knowledge. So our goal was really to sort of understand within Far Cry and Assassin's Creed, what lessons have we learned, or what like huge failures did we have that we would want our colleagues to maybe not replicate. So for us, we're really producing a lot of content in-house and sharing it sort of across the organization, which UB is maybe 35,000 plus across the globe. So small team, really big audience, and again, the way we were structured really came into play in terms of how well we were able to deliver.
I'm Jeff, and I am the creative director at Oxfam America. So we're part of a larger global structure, and I work on a creative team that is aimed at the U.S. base of supporters for Oxfam, and started a while back when we were, believe it or not, mostly print-based. A lot of our communications back in the day, where we had a designer or two and a couple of writers focused on fundraising and advocacy campaigns, communications, and where we've grown over time to do a lot more, have a much broader remit. We've brought in video, we've brought in content strategy, design of our website properties, and introduced our design system for our web properties. And today we're going to talk about basically two primary models for organizing in-house creative teams. Centralized and decentralized. So in a centralized model, you typically have a single team with creative staff. These might include designers, writers, content experts, video, and so forth. In this model, you're all sort of sitting in one team and you report into the same line structure. Typically in this model, we are supporting the goals and objectives of many other teams throughout the organization who draw on creative content to fill their goals. You might have a couple of your own independent goals and projects, but a large volume of the work is driven by other teams. In a decentralized model, you'll typically have your creative staff spread out, not centralized, across other teams and reporting into their line structures and sharing those teams' remits and goals. And so at Oxfam, that would look like having designers, writers, and so forth on, say, several fundraising teams, on some of our advocacy campaign teams, digital engagement, web product, and the like. So originally at Oxfam, our creative team was basically tasked with creating almost all of the content that went out to the public. And this worked when things were smaller and there were a limited number of channels, but over time that just became totally unmanageable and unsustainable. The explosion of social media, other digital channels, and just the voracious need to create content constantly. That can lead to certain pressures to decentralize or potentially even to result in ad hoc decentralization, where teams might go and just hire a designer or hire a writer, and you end up with these silos of different creative staff sitting across the organization, not a lot of coherence. You may or may not share a lot of collaboration standards and things of that sort. And you end up with those creative silos. So we began to shift away from this model of being the creators of everything to being a hub of specialized creators who do creation but also enable others to create on their own teams. So to allow a certain amount of decentralization while retaining that core. And what that involves for us is going from creating all of the instances of content to creating a lot of, but not all of the instances, of creating of content, but also creating the systems through which others are able to create content. So we went from being producers and creators to being producers and creators as well as supporters through things like templates and guidelines, as well as reviewers of work and strategists of work. So helping other teams who have projects that they're going to develop and our being a part, who aren't necessarily doing all of the production of everything, but who are helping guide their work.
So in the case of Ubisoft, we were pretty firmly over on the side of decentralization. We were one of many, and again, we really focused on internal comms. So unfortunately, the stuff that I was producing will never really see the light of day. At the same point in time, we were very picky about the mandates we would actually choose. So if you weren't trying to really explicitly share your knowledge, sorry, we couldn't help you. We had other things to do. That being said, with our 4 videographers, 3 editorial specialists, we really got into a really nice rhythm. We were producing about 2 to 3 pieces a month, and we started to have a sort of series that were sticking. So we had a video series called Tailor Made. We really focus on a tool internally that could help people optimize their engines or help with rendering 3D objects. And more we started to see that people were interested either in having us make it for them or making it on their own. And so with that, we sort of had the aha moment of saying, hey, all these different siloed satellites that have varying degrees of expertise and resources and capacity, we sort of said, hey, maybe we could position ourselves as that mothership and start bringing in the satellites a bit more closely. We could provide the real creative guidance, the standards, and help people who maybe don't have a background in writing. How do you craft your message? What are you really trying to say? How can you make it short? Because no one is watching 15-minute videos where you describe every single feature. And what was really important to us was, yeah, there were teams like Global Communications that had all the resources in the world. They didn't really use in the same way. But another smaller team who was working on accessibility in video games, super important. Again, but they were 3 people, so we didn't necessarily want them to try to adapt our format and do it a bit poorly and really risk sort of diluting the brand and all the good recognition that we had really built up. So that was really the main reason for us to make the shift. But with anything, there are benefits, there are challenges, so we'll talk about just broadly a couple of events that we've observed with some anecdotes as well. So to start off, we can look at consistency first. So in our case, as I said, when you're a real core centralized team, you're working with sort of the same guidelines and standards, it means that whatever you're producing is going to have a pretty consistent look and feel and level of quality. And even within those guidelines, what was nice is that we can then start interpreting how those guidelines actually apply to this team, to this context, to this use case. And that's also where we had a bit of flex room too, to sort of say, hey, maybe we can learn something new, and then really reuse those lessons and bring them back into the standards. So it was a really nice, virtuous sort of feedback loop. And I remember it very clearly too. We had a really cool thing we wanted to film with, I think, the division that was happening up in Malmö in Sweden. And our team was like, great, we'll just fly out there with 5 people, all our equipment. And I remember my boss being like, whoa. I think we have a satellite team there. We gave him the specs. We said we need these shots and this B-roll, and this is how it's going to look at the end. And frankly, consistency speaking, our team received the footage. We put it all together, and that's also where you can sort of see the benefits of having that distributed network. But they're all sort of rowing in the same direction.
Another benefit oftentimes to centralization is just high quality. And we've seen this at Oxfam a lot, where pat myself on the back for that one. With a centralized sort of set of knowledge, shared standards, and a team of creative professionals who are constantly collaborating, the quality level often rises over time. And that's been reflected back to us quite a bit, where even when we have taken on work that had previously been done externally, like teams hiring creative agencies and so forth, we've repeatedly gotten feedback that when we've taken on some of that work, either to save cost or because a vendor went away and they had a time crunch, that we've actually done a lot of that work better in-house and it's performed better than external resources have produced. And that comes with working together a lot, and knowing the organization inside out. And that in turn has reinforced the case for maintaining that centralized team that we have. Another benefit that comes with it often is flexibility. So by not being distributed across a number of teams, we're able to basically allocate resources and kind of swarm on projects when we need them. We don't have a designer sitting in fundraising who maybe doesn't have a lot of fundraising work at the moment, while there are 2 advocacy campaigns going on at the same time and one designer is completely underwater. We regularly shift and move work across staff. So it allows us to cover a lot of ground more flexibly. And related to that, it contains costs. So we don't, if we have 6 teams who have creative needs, we're not hiring 6 designers, 1 on each team. We actually have 2 designers, right? So it's much lower headcount, much lower cost, and we end up being able to cover a lot of variety of needs with fewer resources. So yeah, a way of meeting a wide range of needs with just a limited budget and limited headcount.
And from the perspective of a people manager, what was really exciting was the opportunity for growth. I mean, I didn't have any doubts about my team knowing the latest version of all these softwares and tools. They were always at the cutting edge. That being said, did they always have the sort of people skills or the soft skills to sort of say, hey, how do I do like an intake or a brief with a client? How do I really capture the essence of what they're trying to say when it's not just me and my exact team? And it really forced us to sort of level up a bit and professionalize, but also put in place processes, because again, you quickly outgrow your capacity to manage a request in an Outlook shared email. So it was really a great opportunity, and as a manager, I was really happy to see that my team definitely accepted the challenge and actually wound up becoming team leads. So we actually grew a little bit and then had a video poll lead and editorial lead. So again, in terms of keeping your people motivated, it's a really nice way to sort of say, we're not going to stop you from doing what you like to do, but we're also going to expose you to opportunities where you can, really progress in your career.
And there are great models, but nothing is perfect. We maybe have some cries in the shower from time to time. And so we'll talk about some of those challenges or drawbacks that we face.
Letting go is really hard, and when you're used to sort of doing it all on your own, again, sort of letting go of that controller saying, I have to sort of answer to a client now, again, it's sort of, it hits. At the same time, we really found that we sort of struggled with it in the sense that now we were an internal service that was charging other teams for our work, and when we sort of put a price tag on that product, it sort of made it seem like, oh, wait a second, do I have any input here, or what is my role? We sort of had that switch from, are we collaborators, are we partners, or is it really more the client is always right? So something to be aware of, because we definitely had really great clients and others who were like, you are a service provider and you will do what I say. So again, something to keep in mind. And the bottleneck. Obviously, when we sort of opened the floodgates, it was great because we were like, oh my God, we have so much work. We're going to be able to stretch and invent some new formats and stuff. But on the other side, when you're sort of working with people placed across the organization, it means that there's more people who have an opinion or have to go through approvals and this and that. And in our sense, it almost opened up a bit of a pressure cooker because we had a lot of competing priorities and deadlines, and no one in our team said, oh my God, I don't want to be the weakest link that's holding everyone else up. But it definitely affected our sort of production pipeline and how we were getting things out. So again, make sure you build in some buffer room too, because again, it's a change and you have to adapt to it.
And then one of the things that we definitely face on our team is this sense of ownership, and do we have ownership of our own work, right? So much of our work is driven by other teams. This really comes up most frequently when we're doing annual planning and when we're doing goal setting, right? Different teams fundraising, they have fundraising goals, they have numbers to hit. The digital team has numbers to hit in terms of growth of the audience and so forth. We're feeding into those goals, but we don't own those numbers. And so what do we have for measurables? Output, how much stuff do we make? That seems kind of arbitrary. And so much of our work is guided by other teams' work that even planning at times can be really challenging because, plans change and people's needs change, and you don't know the next 365 days ahead of you. You might know a month, maybe a couple of months. And as other teams' plans change, we're trying to adapt to those changes. So that sense of ownership can be one of the things that is hard to really feel intensely on the team. And I would definitely be lying if I said, I don't have any concerns about my job security, and I never have. So much change is happening, and certainly because we are actually embracing a degree of decentralization, and we're helping teams to be able to create some degree on their own, that thought is in the back of your head quite frequently. If they have the tools they need, like Canva or a design system, and they don't need an actual designer with design training or a true writer who's like got formalized writing training, what do they need us for? And that can obviously be a stressor. But what we found is that actually by leaning into a degree of that decentralization and providing people the tools they need, that has actually built up a positive relationship with teams. They trust us a lot more. They know we're not trying to prevent them from doing the things they need to do, and they can see us embracing that. And that's increased trust. It's increased the quality of their relationships. It's also allowed us to focus on other projects that we might not have otherwise been able to focus on, and even then go and support other teams who weren't necessarily our core quote-unquote clients, right? Teams that have more niche audiences. And that, therefore, has meant that the team is providing more value to the organization. And that, again, builds that case. Why is this team worth having? We've actually grown the amount that we've been able to do. Volume of output has increased across the organization, and more teams are actually being supported in fulfilling their goals.
So what really makes a structure work, or what are the sort of underlying criteria or sort of success factors that you should make sure you have before you jump in head first? For Ubisoft, it was really a balancing act. I really felt oftentimes we were just juggling so many different pieces in the air, but what helped a lot was that knowing with all these different people we were working with, we had a shared goal. Whether it was sort of that profit, again, because when you're reusing knowledge, hopefully you're more efficient, so it takes less time, which is less money. But overall, it's really the age-old maxim, alone we go fast, but together we go far. Velocity was one too. As I said, that sort of pressure cooker, it was a bit of a learning experience, but we found it was really good to sort of level set and make sure that we weren't promising things that we were pulling out of the air. Oh yeah, I'll turn that around in 3 days. That is not realistic. So again, it was a good sort of a reality check. And then on the people side, I think what I really learned a lot about the team, which personalities work well with this model and what kind of culture is going to really support you there. If you have creatives that are a bit more of that, the genius or the lone wolf, centralization can feel like a cage. You're really, at every turn you're being told no, or change this, or I like both versions, can you mix them together, which we love. But overall, you want people who are going to be a bit more open and receptive and adaptable, and again, not too close or sort of married to the actual output. And lastly, like anything, alignment and support, it really felt good to have the backing of the VP of Communications or the head of Production Technology, who was sort of being interviewed in our videos and then sort of promoting us to the team as well. So that type of buy-in or support was really invaluable. If you don't have that, it can sort of feel like you're screaming into the void.
So how did we know at Oxfam that centralization was right for us and why we should keep it? We haven't always, actually. For a period of time, we actually separated the editorial/content side from the design/visual side. And we did that for a few years, and that had certain benefits, right? Like people had certain more focus on different areas of their work, little more ownership of goals within those teams, but it also had different drawbacks and introduced other inefficiencies. We still had to collaborate with one another, and there was more transactional costs to those collaborations. And there were times where something might be a priority for the design team. Somebody came with a request that was more design heavy than writing, but we still needed writing and no one was free. So how do we do that? And perhaps not surprisingly, we did find more of a disconnect between the content editorial side and the visual design side. Designers felt further away from the content of what they were designing, and the content, strategists and writers were feeling a little more separated from design and having to do I have to make a request to the designers now? It was a little weird. And that really became pronounced when we introduced video to the design team, because video being a visual medium, that's where it seemed to make sense to fit, but it's so dependent on narrative, storytelling, narrative arc, and those things. And the raw content that the content team was sourcing and gathering to actually produce those videos. So about a year and a half ago or so, we actually recombined and reestablished the creative team. And then, since doing that, we've seen new improvements to our creative processes, much better collaboration, and sort of bringing back that tightness of visual and editorial, of design and content that sort of felt like it was slipping away a little bit. And honestly, it's more fun. The folks on the team definitely talk about enjoying it more. And as soon as we said, I think we're going to, recombine, everyone was like, "Yay, we're getting the band back together." And that's kind of how we knew, like, it was probably right. It felt right. So to a certain degree, there was the sense of like, okay, it was working. Let's not mess with that secret sauce that we've got. So thinking about, is centralization or decentralization right for your creative team? This is not like, these are the check boxes to fill and it's written in stone, but these are a few criteria that might help you make that determination. So first and foremost, the variety of need. If you only have a couple or a few teams that rely on the creative output, decentralizing might not be a problem because you might have a limited amount of inconsistency that's going to happen, and it might not be that high a cost to source a designer on, say, 2 teams, for example. On the other hand, with far more teams, that's going to get very expensive, and you're going to have a lot more, inconsistency popping up that you got to figure out how to collaborate. And when you only have a few teams, you might be able to do that collaboration in less formal spaces and still maintain some of that glue. Resources. At an organization, nonprofit organization like Oxfam, resources are always tight, and it's like every dollar you're counting. That was another reason why centralization, we really knew, was like right. We weren't going to totally split up the team because it's just too costly. If, on the other hand, you work for an organization or a company with really deep pockets, splitting that up and having that sort of focus per team may actually be worth the cost associated with it. And then consistency. How important is consistency, and how much tolerance is there for inconsistency? If you're at an organization that has multiple brands or multiple product lines, separating your creative work across those lines may actually be a really good idea, where they don't have to all be the same. In fact, maybe they shouldn't be the same. In an organization like Oxfam, there's one brand, there's one core corporate message, basically, and one of our big challenges is getting people to understand who we are and repeating that message and that brand over and over again. Centralization really, really helps with that. And then finally, I like to think about, to what degree is design or editorial voice or the creative work core to the brand or the organization. So if you're at a company or an organization where it's very design-centric, or where the brand or the digital product is effectively the offering, then a lot of the discipline, a lot of the training, a lot of the sort of thought process and mentality for creative work or design work or brand may actually be kind of baked into the DNA of the organization and the culture of the organization. And those skills may exist in the senior leadership and the leadership of each team. So if you are separated out, it might not be a problem because that's really baked into how the organization operates. At an organization like I work at, there's this external mission, and the creative work is in service of fulfilling that external mission. And therefore, if we didn't have, people with design training, with editorial training, with video training, with really deep knowledge of those things, the quality isn't going to be there. By having them centralized, it enables us to ensure that, the metaphor I like to use is that when the organization goes out the door, we're not going out the door with our pants down, right, and looking ridiculous. We tighten us up before we send us on our way.
Yeah, so for all that, we can really see a really great sort of ripple effect at multiple levels. So for employees, it's quick to onboard, and as we talked about, there's a real opportunity for growth. Teams and departments are getting more efficient delivery, and organizations, obviously, cost savings, economies of scale. For your brand, as we said, everyone is sort of in service of it overall, so you're presenting something that maybe you worked very hard to do, and you don't want to risk someone messing up your logo and putting it out there, and that's just a very, I think, a simple example. And lastly, for your audiences, obviously we're working to establish trust and credibility and continue to bring out that brand promise, all of which centralization can support. Thank you so much.
That's what we've got.